Welcome back to Warping Tactics. Today we're going to look back over the 11th edition terrain previews and looking at what they could mean for Grey Knights. Now I know these previews have been out for a while now, so this is not exactly breaking news. I've just been a bit slow at getting this video together, but terrain is one of those things that's always worth coming back to because Grey Knights is completely changed how the army plays. We are an elite army. We do not have endless bodies to throw away and definitely do not want to be standing in the open, trading shots with tanks, monsters and half a current meta. Grey Knights win games through movement, positioning, staging, teleporting, and forcing those awkward decisions from the opponent. So even if this preview is not brand new, the impact could still be huge. The big things I want to look at are terrain areas, the hidden rule, changes to cover, plunging fire, and how objective being tied to the terrain could affect our mission play. And there are already some interesting Grey Knight questions here. For example, if cover is giving a penalty to ballistic skill, and something like Voldus is leading Terminators or Paladins with his -1 to hit rule, there's a question whether those defense layers could potentially stack together. We do need the full 11th wording before we get too excited, but imagine trying to shift a Voldus-led Terminator or Paladin unit sitting in the terrain, protected by cover, and making incoming shooting even worse. That could be a nightmare to remove, so let's go through the terrain preview properly and look at what it could mean for the Sons of Titan. So, as we said already, this preview is all about terrain, and for Grey Knights, terrain is never just scenery, it's how we survive. We are not usually trying to win by sitting at the back of the board and blasting everything off the table. We need places to stage, places to hide, and safe routes to move through before we commit. So the first big question with these terrain changes is simple. Does this help Grey Knights to get position without being picked up too early? And for me, I think what I've seen so far, I think it might be. If terrain area is hidden and cover all work together properly, our infantry could have much better ways of surviving before launching out with charges, shooting or teleport plays. That could be massive for units like Terminators, Paladins, Purifiers, Interceptors and even characters like Voldus leading a durable brick. Because Grey Knights do not need to be safe forever, we just need to be safe long enough to choose when the hammer falls. This slide is where the changes start to matter properly. Gives Virtual seem to be separating two things, the terrain feature and the terrain area. The terrain feature is the physical model on the table, so the ruin, wall, tree, pipe, barricade, or whatever scenery you are using. The terrain area is the footprint underneath it, and that is the bit that really matters for the rules. For Grey Knights, that is very important because we play such a precise movement game. We need to know exactly where a unit can stand, where it can hide, where it can threaten from, and whether it is safe after moving or teleporting. This really interesting part here is the hidden rule. From what we've seen, infantry, beasts and swarms inside terrain can be hidden as long as they do not shoot in the current or previous player turn. For Grey Knights, that could affect a massive part of the army. Strike squads, Purifiers, Interceptors, Purgation squads, Terminators, Paladins, and most of our characters are all infantry. So suddenly, a lot of our army may be able to use terrain to stage much more safely, but there is a catch. If shooting breaks, hidden then becomes firing a couple of Stormbolters for a tiny bit of damage might not be worth it. You might be better off keeping that Terminator unit, Paladin Brick or Purifier squad hidden for another turn, waiting for the right moment to step out and commit. And that feels very Grey Knights, not just running forward and hoping for the best, but waiting, staging and then striking when the opponent has left themselves open. This slide gives us a better idea of why the hidden rule could be such a big deal. If a unit is inside the terrain and counts as hidden, enemy units outside detection range cannot just pick it up from across the table. From what we've seen so far, that detection range is around 15 inches. That's a massive change. For Grey Knights, think about Terminators or Paladins, units staging inside terrain. In 10th edition, if the angles were bad or the windows were awkward, you could sometimes lose expensive models just because one tiny bit of the unit was visible. With hidden, terrain should be much more reliable as a staging tool. That really helps our slower infantry Terminators, the Paladins, only move 5 inches, so they need a safe place to stand while they prepare to push the midfield. If terrain lets them sit there without being shot from miles away, that gives Grey Knights much more control over when they actually commit. And again, this is where something like Voldus could come very interesting. If he's leading Terminators or Paladins, they already become harder to hit because of his Sanctuary ability. Then if we are also in terrain and benefiting from cover, depending on how the final wording works, that could mean incoming shooting could be very awkward for the opponent. We do need to be careful here because we do not yet know the full wording of the 11th edition. But the idea of Voldus-led brick staging in terrain, forcing the enemy to come closer before they can actually properly deal with it, feels very strong. It means Grey Knights may be able to hold the midfield less by being cheap and numerous, and more by being difficult and annoying and very hard to remove, which, let's be honest, feels exactly what we should be. Now, this is where terrain starts becoming a bit more than just cover or lines of sight. This mission preview shows terrain areas being used as part of the mission itself, with units able to interact with terrain and potentially trap those areas. And for Grey Knights, that is really interesting, but also a bit dangerous, because normally terrain is our friend. We want to hide in it, stage behind it, and use it to control when the enemy can actually interact with us. But if the mission starts rewarding your opponents for trapping terrain areas, suddenly that nice safe ruin in the middle of the board might not be so safe anymore. Even if Terminators or Paladins sitting in the terrain might be protected from long range shooting, but if that terrain becomes part of your opponent's scoring plan, then we need to think very carefully about whether we actually want to stay there. This is where Grey Knight players will need to avoid autopilot. We cannot just look at the terrain and say, that's safe, I stand there. We need to ask, is this terrain helping me score? Is it helping me stage? Is it forcing my opponent into a bad position? Or am I just walking into a mission trap and giving away points? The good news is that Grey Knights do have the tools to respond. Gates of Infinity, Deep Strike, Interceptors, Dread Knights, and our general movement tricks all mean we can reposition better than many armies. But this kind of mission could punish lazy positioning. So for me, the big takeaway is this. In 11th edition, terrain might not be just where Grey Knights hide. It might be where the game is actually won or lost. This shows the other side of that mission pairing, and this one is more about taking and holding objectives. And this is where Grey Knights need to be honest about where we are good at. And we are very good at movement. We are very good at appearing where the opponent does not want us. We are very good at threatening awkward angles and forcing people to respect charges and teleport plays. We are not always the best army at simply standing on loads of objectives for 5 turns. We are elite, we have fewer units, and every unit lost hurts. So if a mission rewards holding multiple objectives, especially objectives in the opponent's territory, then our list needs to have enough real mission pieces. This is where strike squads and Brother Terminators become very important. Strike squads are brilliant because they can sticky objectives with Sanctifying Ritual. They can touch a point, keep control of it, and then move away, forcing the opponent to actually come and take it back. Terminators are the opposite side of that. They are not cheap, but they are durable, OC2, and with a banner OC3, and with a Narcisium, they can bring a model back in the command phase. So they are better at standing on a contested objective and saying, no, this belongs to Titan now. Paladins could also be really interesting here as a bully unit, especially if terrain and hidden make it easier for them to stay safely before pushing onto the midfield. So for Grey Knights, this kind of mission asks a very simple list building question. Have we brought enough units that can actually play the mission, or have we built too much damage and not enough scoring? This shows the kind of suggested terrain setup Games Workshop seems to be pushing forward for 11th edition. For Grey Knights, terrain consistency matters a lot. If you turn up to a table with barely any terrain, suddenly your expensive infantry can get shot before your movement tricks even matter. But if the table has proper staging points, block lanes, and safe areas to move between, Grey Knights become much more interesting to play. Looking at the layouts like this, the first thing I would ask is, where can my Terminators stage safely? Where can my strike squad sticky an objective and then move away? Where can my Purifiers sit before stepping out with Crow? Where can my Dread Knights threaten without being exposed to every anti-tank gun on the board? That is the key. Grey Knight games are often decided before the first dice are rolled, because deployment and staging are so important. We're not just asking where I can deploy, we're asking where can I be safe, where can I threaten, and where will my opponent struggle to respond. And if 11th edition terrain layouts make those questions clearer, then that should reward good Grey Knight play. Because when the Sons of Titan can plan properly, teleport properly, and strike at the right time, that is when the army feels at its best. So this is another example of the kind of suggested terrain layout we might be seeing in 11th edition, and this one looks very different. The important thing here is that different layouts change how Grey Knights need to move. On some tables, the midfield will feel quite compact, and our infantry can stage from ruin to ruin fairly comfortably, but on longer layouts, especially Hammer and Anvil style setups, distance becomes a bit bigger deal. That can be awkward for Grey Knight infantry. Terminators and Paladins only move 5 inches, so they do not want to be spending half the game slowly walking up the board while the opponent scores around them. But this is also where Grey Knights have a real advantage. We have Gates of Infinity, Interceptors, Dread Knights, and teleport tricks that can just let us ignore some of those distances. So the real question is not just can I get across the board, the question is when do I commit? If you teleport too early, you might land, do a bit of damage, and then get removed. If you wait too long, the opponent might build up too much of a lead on primary. So on layouts like this, I think Grey Knights need to use the terrain as stepping stones, stay safely, threaten multiple angles, force the opponent to spread out, and then hit the weak point when they overextend. That is where the army becomes dangerous, not just because we can move quickly, but because the opponent has to constantly ask, where are the Grey Knights going next? This is one more the practical changes because it shows that terrain does not need to be a massive L-shaped ruin anymore. We could see more long, thin terrain areas, smaller footprints, and different types of scenery being used across the table. And for Grey Knights, that could be really useful. We often do not need a giant fortress to be hide behind. Sometimes we just need enough terrain to stage safely from one turn before we make our move. A strike squad might only need somewhere safe after sticking an objective. Purifiers might only need one protected position before stepping out with Crow and throwing out all those purifying flame shots. Interceptors might use these similar terrain areas as little stepping stones, jumping from one safe spot to another. And Red Knights could really benefit from having more angles where they can threaten the board without being overexposed to every anti-tank weapon in the opponent's army. The other nice thing is that it could make tables look much more interesting. Instead of every board being made from the same style of ruins, you could have pipes, barricades, trees, containers, generators, or proper weird Xenos terrain, and it could still function properly in the game. So for Grey Knights, this is not just a visual change. More varied terrain could mean more movement options, more staging options, and more ways to create pressure without immediately getting punished. And that is exactly the kind of battle Grey Knights want. Now we get to Plunging Fire, and this is a really interesting one. From the preview, it looks like being higher up in the terrain could now improve your ballistic skill when shooting down a target on ground level. That is quite a big change from 10th edition, where Plunging Fire was more about improving AP, but was often awkward because you needed to be very high up, and a lot of terrain just did not make it practical. If the new version is easier to access, it could actually matter. For Grey Knights, the obvious units to think about are Purgation Squads and Purifiers. A Purgation Squad with side cannons or silencers could really like a safe elevated firing position, especially if they can use terrain to avoid being picked up straight away. And Purifiers with Crow or Purifiers on their own could also enjoy better shooting angles because Purifying Flame already does a lot of work in the infantry. You can imagine that hitting on twos. But I would not build my whole game plan around this. Grey Knights are not a pure shooting army. We do not want to climb onto a building, look dramatic for one turn, and then realise we cannot get back down, charge anything, or play the mission. So I think Plunging Fire is a tool, not the plan. Use it when it helps, use it when it gives you a good angle, use it when it lets a unit contribute without exposing itself too much. But Grey Knights still win through movement, timing, and pressure. We are not suddenly becoming Astra Militarium with shiny helmets and better cheekbones. This slide is about the footprint areas of the terrain, and this might not sound like the most exciting thing in the world, but it could be one of those most useful changes for actual games. If terrain areas have clearer sizes and shapes, then everyone knows what they are playing with. That means fewer arguments, cleaner games, and much better planning. And for Grey Knights, planning is everything. We need to know exactly where a terrain area starts and ends. Are we hidden? Are we within detection range? Can we be shot? Can we deep strike safely? Can we fit a Terminator unit in that gap? Can a strike squad touch the objective and still play and still be protected? Those tiny positioning details matter so much for Grey Knights because our units are expensive and we cannot afford to just guess wrong. It is also good from the hobby point of view. If Games Workshop gives us the standard footprint sizes, players can actually make their own terrain bases and build much more themed battlefields. You could have demon-infused ruins, shattered cathedrals, ritual circles, sanctified ground, warp-scorched objective areas, all while still using the proper game footprint. So for me, the big benefit here is clarity. Cleaner terrain means cleaner movement. Cleaner movement means better staging, and better staging makes Grey Knights much scarier. Because when we know exactly where we can stand, where we can hide, and where we can strike from, that is when the army really starts to feel dangerous. So that is my look back at the 11th edition terrain previews from a Grey Knights point of view. And even though these previews have been out for a little while now, I still think they are really important to us because Grey Knights are an army that lives and dies by terrain. If terrain is clearer, safer, and more interactive, that could mean very good news for our expensive infantry. The hidden rule could make staging Terminators, Paladins, Purifiers, Interceptors, and Strike Squads much more reliable. The new cover system could make some of our durable units even harder to shift, especially if things like Voldus, leading Terminators or Paladins can stack defensive penalties in our favour. Suggested terrain layouts and clearer footprints should also make games feel more consistent, which is massive for an army that relies so heavily on precise positioning. But there is also a warning. If objectives and missions are more closely tied to terrain, then we cannot just teleport around without thinking. Where we stand, where we hide, and when we commit could matter even more than before. And honestly, I like that. Grey Knights should reward careful movement, smart stage, and choosing the perfect moment to strike. So let me know what you think. Do these terrain changes look good for Grey Knights? Are you excited for Hidden Rule? And do you think units like Voldus, Terminators, Paladins, Purifiers, or Intercept could become even better because of these changes? And if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe for more Grey Knight content, list talk, and tactical breakdowns. Until next time, brothers and sisters, stay strong, hold the line, and keep purging.